Welcome to,
Whoops. Hold on. Okay.
welcome to the Select Board meeting for November 20th, 2023. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and I just want to announce that Select Board member George Dixon will be joining us via Zoom this evening. Okay, so first item on the agenda is public service announcements. Virginia?
Yep. First up, we have the Day Before Thanksgiving Walk, which will be held November 22nd at 2 o'clock at Thanksgiving Forest. I don't think there's a flyer. And it'll be at 2 p.m. on Wednesday. You meet at the Janet Road entrance. There'll be fire, cookies, and hot chocolate, as well as some local history by Fred Merriam. And Scout Troop 74 is helping to sponsor that event. Next up, we have the Chelmsford Health Department is offering a seminar on Tuesday, November 21st at 6 p.m. at the library on understanding hoarding and providing some education for family, friends, and caregivers on how to support a loved one who may struggle with overcluttering or hoarding. Registration is not required, but it's preferred if you're able to do that with the health department. Next, the health department is sponsoring a walk-in flu clinic every Monday from 9 to 4 p.m. and every Tuesday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the health department at the town offices at 50 Billrica Road. These are for anyone 19 years or older. There are some limited youth vaccines available, but you need to call ahead to confirm availability. And there are also high-dose vaccines available for those who are 65 years or older. You can contact the Chelmsford Health Department at 978-250-5241. And the Chelmsford Health Department is providing a depression and anxiety support group. Their next meeting is November 28th. It will be facilitated by a licensed professional and the Chelmsford Health Department Human Services Associate. This is a support group for individuals 18 years and older to have some safe conversation and support. Those happen every fourth Tuesday of the month from 6:30 to 8 p.m., with the exception that the December date will be Tuesday, December 12th, and that's located at the Chelmsford Center for the Arts in the Cabaret Room. And from the Chelmsford Health Department, you can sign up for free Narcan training. There'll be a session on November 14th from 6 to 6:30 p.m. and sessions on December 5th from 10 to 10:30 a.m. or 6 to 6:30 p.m. at the Chelmsford Town Hall Fire Department training room in the lower level. You can register at www.chelmsfordma.gov, and registration is required due to limited space. If you have questions, call the Chelmsford Health Department at 978-250-5241. And I just want to pause there for a minute. I let the health department know I get out of breath every time I read all their announcements. So I want to thank them for everything they're doing for the community. It's a lot. Okay, next up we have the North Chelmsford Common Tree Lighting event on Saturday, December 3rd at 4 p.m. They'll have music, snacks, Santa, and other fun for the family. Their specific decorating date...
I think it's actually the 2nd. Saturday's the 2nd.
Oh, okay. Yep, it should be Saturday the 2nd. Thank you, Pat. In 2023 at 4 p.m. And one other amendment, if anybody would like to assist during the event or help decorate this Sunday, November 26th, from 10 to 2, you can reach out to Brian Creamer or Joe Tierney, and Brian's email address is on the flyer. It's brian.f.creamer@gmail.com. Okay, and this one is on Sunday, December 3rd. This is the Chelmsford Annual Holiday Parade at Chelmsford Center. Prelude, at Chelmsford Center from 4 to 6 p.m. And the tree lighting will be at 5 p.m. They will have the traditional horse-drawn and tractor hay rides for the whole family, as well as other activities. And most of these events are free to the public, although they will accept donations to help support the event and next year's event. There'll also be free photos with Santa, sponsored by the Chelmsford Dog Association, and you'll be able to download those from their online photo gallery. So at 4 o'clock, Santa arrives, and at 5 o'clock, the tree lights are turned on. Let's see if I can get through this one without any mistakes. On December 3rd, the CCA will also be having a festival of trees. If you can donate a small tree from 20 to 36 inches and decorate it any way you wish, they will be on display from starting the week of December 1st through December 5th and for the holiday prelude. And then they are planning to raffle the trees off by the Friends of the CCA to raise money for future events at the Chelmsford Center for the Arts.
You missed one that was in between those two.
I did?
You did.
Oh, there's no flyer for it.
There's no flyer for it, the Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
Okay, yep. And also on the holiday list, there is going to be a Hanukkah Story Lantern Walk on Sunday, December 3rd from 4:30 to 7 p.m. at Sunny Meadow Farm. Okay, now we're out of the holiday events. For anyone who's interested, there will be a virtual design public hearing on Wednesday, December 6th for the Rourke Bridge Replacement Project. This is being sponsored by Mass DOT. And the purpose of that hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to become acquainted with the Rourke Bridge replacement. The project consists of the bridge replacement, Wood Street extension over Boston and Main Railroad, and the Merrimack River. They are also planning on bicycle accommodations during that renovation project. So again, it's Wednesday, December 6th at 6 p.m. If you want to attend, it's www.mass.gov/orgs/highway-division/events, or there's a code on the flyer that you can also scan. And next up, we have from the Lowell Regional Transit Authority. For the entire month of December, they are encouraging the public to try public transit and ride for free on all LRTA buses and Roadrunner vehicles. And you can find more information about that at www.lrta.com. And I think that's it.
All right, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is a discussion with our town's legislative delegation, and we have in the room this evening Senator Mike Barrett and Representative Simon Cataldo and Rodney Elliott, and I believe Sarah has joined us remotely. So first of all, we'd like to give each of you an opportunity to give a brief update on what has happened over the past 6 months or so since we last saw you, and then we can get into things moving forward. So why don't we start with the Senator?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you all for having us. Delighted to be here with my colleagues from the House. We're in recess as of last Wednesday. The legislature has met continuously during this calendar year until last week, and then by constitutional requirement, we go on brief recess until the month of January. The bills that predominate in my mind, of course, begin with the state budget, the fiscal year 2024 budget. But we've legislated in two significant areas, and we're in the midst of attempting a third. First of all, you've seen, and a lot of credit goes to the House, you've seen major gun control legislation advance several months ago. The Senate is drafting a different approach. This always happens, that the branches agree on some things and disagree on others, but gun control has attracted a great deal of attention, generated perhaps more mail this calendar year than any other issue that I can recall. Our debates, first in the House and then as we prepare a bill in the Senate, seem to be punctuated by reports of violence around the world and around the country, it seems, almost every week. So the issue becomes very complex. Massachusetts, to its credit, has the lowest incidence of death by gun violence of any of the 50 states. But there is also the feeling that we could do more to secure people's safety and still respect people's Second Amendment rights. A second major issue on which both branches have acted is health care, Madam Chair. We've got different emphases, but ideally both will see their way to conclusion. In the House, again, to its credit, there's been major legislation having to do with long-term care, nursing home stays, a focus on ensuring the safety and welfare of patients who stay in the Commonwealth's nursing homes, but at the same time ensuring that people are paid decently, the caregivers who staff the facilities. So the House, I believe, and you'll hear more about it from them, I wager, has done a major piece. We focused on pharmaceutical costs, the costs of prescription drugs, and we're moving the state into a situation that Medicaid has enjoyed, but not the private insurance that many of us hold. Medicaid is able collectively to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies to lower the costs of critical drugs that people need to sustain their health. We haven't attempted group purchasing effectively on behalf of those insured in the private system here in Massachusetts. The Senate would like to see us use our collective purchasing clout as patients and as members of health insurance plans in order to secure lower cost. Again, my hope is that we take a leaf from the House's experience and see long-term care reform to conclusion, but also from the Senate's, and figure out a way to address the cost of prescription drugs. A third area that's generating enormous controversy throughout Massachusetts has to do with the number of folks coming into the state, migrants, and in many cases refugees. As you all know, because the governor's been visibly involved with this, we've reached a significant number, count 7,500 families and still counting, who are in almost every case relatively recent arrivals in Massachusetts. In many, many instances, they have a right to be here. The U.S. Congress created a special position or special status for refugees from the Haiti because of the earthquake of 4 or 5 years ago. And I think recently arrived Haitians perhaps are the largest group that are represented in the overflow shelter system. In many cases, when their cases are adjudicated, they will be found to be here legally and to have a right to stay. The federal immigration system is so overwhelmed, though, that we are hearing of folks in our shelter system who have been given court dates under the federal system for 2027. A lack of judges, a lack of courtrooms, a lack of resources all the way around, an extraordinary situation. And we are, both branches are attempting to deal with that, as is the governor. We weren't able to come to a conclusion in terms of the best approach to adopt. We're going to have to inject some additional state money into the system. Both the House and the Senate would agree on the general outlines of that requirement. But what we really have got to do, all of us, citizens of Chelmsford, members of the state legislature, we've got to appeal to the U.S. Congress to appropriate additional money. You can disagree on many aspects of this recent issue. You can talk exhaustively about the situation down on the southern border, but the point remains that many of the folks currently in Massachusetts, as it happens, are not folks from Latin American countries. They are, as I say, from the islands. They're from the Ukraine. They're from Syria. They're from depressed economies in the African subcontinent, and many in the end will be found to have a legal right. Some won't, but many will be found to have a legal right to be here, and we are now faced with having to deal with the sheer volume of folks for whom none of us are prepared. So that's going to be an ongoing issue, and it's going to be difficult to figure out how to deal with it. I would be interested to hear this evening about how Chelmsford is encountering this. Every community in my district, and I represent 8 towns, from Chelmsford south through Carlisle and Bedford and Concord, Lincoln, Lexington, the city of Waltham, the town of Weston. Most of my communities have folks in hotels, oftentimes business hotels. At least that was their original purpose pre-COVID, and now they're being repurposed. So I'm seeing new families arrive everywhere I look and everywhere my colleagues look, and it's an amazing situation that requires a coordinated federal and state response. So lots to talk about, and I know there are local priorities here, and I look forward to hearing more about those with you. But for the moment, though, I want to cede the table to my colleagues, and I want to thank you all for having me this evening.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we first go to Representative Arcero? You said he is on Zoom, right, since he's the senior representative
Thank
of
you,
the
Chair.
delegation.
I appreciate it. Bear with me here a little bit. The reason I'm Zooming today is I kind of lost my voice the last 24 hours. Certain people in my family are very happy about that, but it's made my job a little bit more difficult lately. Thank you to Senator Barrett and certainly my colleagues here from the Chelmsford delegation. One thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit, certainly the Senator did touch on a lot of those pieces. First, on the migrant issue, just wanted to also sort of show some frustration as well. And the federal government has been expedited working papers too, Senator. I think for folks that are right now seeking shelter or in shelter to work with our federal partners to get folks up and working again. I think that's another key component to this as well, just to add to you laying it out as effectively and as well as you did. For myself, I chair the House Committee on Housing, the Joint Committee on Housing, with my Senate counterpart, Lydia Edwards. And something that's sort of coming our direction relatively soon, we're still working on the date, but in the new year is going to be the housing bond bill. And if passed, this bond bill, about $4.2 billion, in which the governor has filed about a month ago, would be the largest increase investment in housing in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts history. A lot of that 4.3, about 1.7 billion, is going to be to the public housing portfolio. I know that David Hedison here in Chelmsford has done a wonderful job of advocating not just for Chelmsford, but for the housing stock across the Commonwealth. I know that I've had numerous meetings with him about the challenges here in Chelmsford, as is the delegation. And we look towards certainly David Hedison's, the Chelmsford Board of Selectmen, and folks, when that bill comes closer, to look towards things for Chelmsford as well, whether that be language or something in an earmark. Again, the bill has been filed by the governor. We anticipate in mid-January we'll be having a public hearing. There are 28 major policy initiatives on top of the sort of capitalization of the housing portfolio. The administration, as well as the House and the Senate, we both look towards improving our housing stock for the Commonwealth. We're about 200,000 units short, if you will, to be where we should be by 2035. And that is the goal that we have as a benchmark, is to create those more units by that period of time. But I think the House and the Senate and the administration's real priority here is to not only increase production for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in reaching those benchmarks and those goals, but also to provide tools in the toolbox for communities to get their arms around affordability as well. I know, from, the Berkshires to Cape Cod, there's so many different housing challenges that we're dealing with right now. And I think I would implore the board and certainly your stakeholders in Chelmsford to think about things that could help Chelmsford in this bill as well. And certainly, that the group here will go to bat, and we anticipate that happening mid-January. So that's a little bit about what's going on in housing, and I'll turn that over to my colleagues to continue having this sort of free-flow conversation on issues. So wherever you have next, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Representative Cataldo?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Select Board, Town Manager Cohen. It's great to be with you, and I've really appreciated over the last approximately 11 months how much back and forth communication we're able to have. I have frequent emails from the town manager, and we're able to have a continuous conversations and communication such that we don't need to only be talking during these meetings, but also happy for the opportunity to report out to you and have this discussion. You've received exhaustive and I think informative and accurate reports from my colleague, Senator Barrett, and from Rep. Arciero. So I'll be very brief and happy to answer any questions whatsoever that you have. But I just wanted to note a few items specific to Chelmsford. We recently had the opportunity, Rep. Arciero, Rep. Elliott, and me to, upon the invitation of the school committee, meet with the superintendent and the school committee regarding the plans for a new school building. And of course, that relies in significant part on the MSBA approval of that plan. And so we were very, I found that that briefing to be very helpful for us in terms of our advocacy to try to move that plan along. And so I hope that we continue to have that close level of communication. I think that there was a request by the town manager to talk a little bit about several state line items and funding, particularly with regard to local funding. Chapter 90 funding, as I think you know, has did not change much year over year. What did change a lot with respect to Chelmsford was the Chapter 70 funding, which rose at about an 18% clip. That was uncommon. I can speak only for myself, but the other communities that I represent only had about a 1 or 2% increase. And I think that change is due in very significant part to the town leadership, and you should take some credit, a lot of credit for that change. I know there's been many years of advocacy for that increase long before I became one of the state reps here. So thank you for that, and hopefully we can keep that moving in the right direction and won't be satisfied with what we have now. With regard to the housing issues, I just want to note it. So I have two large congregate shelters in the district that I represent, one that's been there in Concord since February and another opening imminently in Acton. And I want to impress upon you something that you probably don't need to hear, which is that the communication with the legislative delegation in terms of what you're hearing about that is really important. We've been able to get out in front of some issues that have been raised by the town. Sometimes the town will receive information before the state legislative delegation. This is a triage situation that we're dealing with regard to migrant housing. And so, I want to thank you for all the communication that you've had with us, and ask you to continue that as we move forward. There have also been several earmarks that I think have been discussed at prior meetings. I won't go too much into the details, but the town is enjoying a benefit of having 3 representatives with the earmarked funds, and the town, we're working with the town to make sure that all the paperwork is in place for those to be received. There was one other line item in the budget that I just wanted to pause on because it was teed up by the town manager prior to this meeting, which is mental health care in Massachusetts. In pretty much every area, in every part of the mental health care delivery system, we saw a significant increase in funding in this fiscal year budget. And one of those is something that I've heard a lot from folks that are working on the front lines in Chelmsford, which is the availability of professionals to deliver those services. And so we have increases in loan forgiveness programs, incentives to enter that line of work, and a number of other attempts that I hope will be successful at facilitating that. So with that, I'll turn it over back to the chair. And again, very glad to answer any questions. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. I'm Representative Elliott.
The benefit of going last. I think my colleagues have done a wonderful job of talking about sort of macro issues at the State House as well as local issues. I can add some of the local issues that I've been working on, in particular just today at the State House, the Joint Committee on Transportation that heard the bill that was passed at town meeting at a vote of 117 to 15, and that would be the home rule petition for Ledge Road. A number of residents came down to participate and testify, some maybe on Zoom. It was well received by the Committee on Transportation. Many letters, videos, pictures have been received from our colleagues in the Transportation Committee, and I thought it was very positive. Now, granted, it's just a hearing, and there are a number of processes that it still has to go through, but I thought it was important, it was significant, and the committee was impressed with the testimony of residents that came down to the State House today. Other things, Select Board Member Crockett-Timmons did mention the Rourke Bridge. Clearly it affects lots of folks in Chelmsford and Lowell and the surrounding area. I'm a member of the working group that did and does participate in meetings prior to the public hearing. I can tell you there are 2 projects that are taking place. One is an interim project, interim repair project that work is slated to begin sometime soon, presumably the first or second week in December. It's about a $1.5 million repair project. So you may see notices that the bridge will be closed at night. The work will be done at night to replace structural as well as panels on the bridge. And not to disclose too much more before the public hearing, but the New Rourke Bridge project, or the replacement project, is on schedule, and funding, for better for worse, the longer the project delays, the more expensive it is. But at this point, it's about a $142 million bridge. And DOT is confident that will remain, that cost will remain at that level, and it will proceed. Bid documents will start the process in mid-2024, with construction beginning in the third quarter of 2025. We can talk a little bit about the supplemental bond bill, but I think that it's relative to more contracts and some other items, including, the $250 million that's set aside for immigrant and refugees. Both bodies met late into the evening last Wednesday night. There's still some details that need to be ironed out, and we're all hopeful that that funding will come through the conference committee process. Some other bills that were heard, I had a bill 3580. I know there's been discussion, myself and Representative Cataldo and Sierra have attended a number of water district meetings relative to PFAS. There are a number of bills on Beacon Hill that have been heard, in particular Speaker Pro Tem Kate Hogan that has been a leader on PFAS. My bill, signed with Senator Kennedy and a couple of other representatives, speaks to the funding of that to remediate at the various infrastructure that we need. So the bill has been heard anyway, and it has not been released out of committee. But just on the local side, I know that Representative Cataldo mentioned being in contact with all of you. I think that's helpful and productive, particularly when residents contact us. We like to share with you and vice versa. East Richardson Road comes to mind. I've sent a letter to Mass DOT at the request of neighbors for signalization at East Richardson Road, given the number of accidents. We've been in touch with the police department as well to get accident data. This coming Wednesday, I'm a member of the Veterans Committee, but all members of the legislature were gracious enough to be able to participate in something called Coats for Vets, where we'll meet the two VSOs, at least in my district, Lowell and Chelmsford, to distribute buckets, as they're called. They're orange buckets from Home Depot, and they're filled with gloves and socks and coats and other winter items for veterans. So we were able to, to secure. I think I have 25 buckets that we're willing to. We're going to share with the veteran service offices. Just this coming Wednesday. What else do I have here? And along those same lines, I know the governor has filed a comprehensive bill on veterans. It's just called the HERO Act, which includes 17 tax incentives and policy changes for our veterans to expand services, to increase benefits, and modernize services provided to our veterans. I think that's an important piece of legislation that will be, both branches will be discussing and passing in the upcoming term. Scotty Hollow, as the manager knows and the select board knows, several months ago, there was quite a bit of water being retained in one of the culverts owned by Mass DOT. I have been in touch with Mass DOT. I've met with Department of Public Works here in the town relative to the, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Manager, 7 million gallons of water that was retained as a result of what we think is a beaver dam. I've been in touch with Scotty Hollow residents. They had their annual meeting Wednesday night, but we were stuck in session. But Mass DOT indicated that a claim should be submitted, and I'll be meeting with them to follow up on that. I toured the location, and there's a footbridge and some other damage to the property. We hope to be able to get that funding back or repairs from Mass DOT, the Mass Highway Division. I think that concludes sort of some of the items I wanted to bring forward to the board tonight, and thank you for your time.
If I could just ask you one follow-up question on the committee hearing today about the Ledge Road home rule petition. How do you anticipate that going forward? What would be the timeline? I know a lot of people that are very interested in that.
There's a lot of interest, and I can tell both chairs of the Joint Committee on Transportation, as I mentioned, we're impressed with the number of not only individuals that testified, but those that have submitted testimony on behalf of this legislation. I wish I could tell you the time frame. Typically, the process is the committee will meet and they will put together, they will vote on the various bills that have been heard before the committee, and then that's when the bill is released. Some committees have adopted rules, essentially Robert's Rules of Order, if you will, not to that extent. Some committees have not, so some committees are moving bills out and reporting out bills, and some are not, unfortunately. So I don't have a definitive answer to that question, but I'm hopeful that it's soon.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I do want to also, thank all four of you for your efforts for the town of Chelmsford and for the earmarks that we did receive this fiscal year. I mean, those are definitely well appreciated, and you know that they're, used to their highest extent here in Chelmsford. So at our last meeting.
If I could just say quickly, I know that the manager had sent us a text just a little bit about like sort of the paperwork to get the money, just been like a little bit cumbersome. And we would kind of scratch our heads about that too. I've heard from some other legislators in different districts that the administration might be a different protocol, certainly, of course, than the Baker administration and the Patrick administration. So it's quite possible it could be a little bit about getting their sea legs on some of these legislative earmarks and making sure they're getting them out to communities and stuff. I know we didn't say that in the outset, but Representative Cataldo did touch on sort of the correspondence. So that was our take on it, Paul. Just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, thank you.
So we will get those funds. I'm hoping.
Yes.
That's good. Okay, so at our last meeting, we talked briefly about what we wanted to discuss with the four of you this evening, and two major issues you've touched on briefly are housing and infrastructure. And in Chelmsford, I mean, and I'm sure many places, they go hand in hand, because in order for us to increase housing, whether it be affordable or market rate or whatever, we do have infrastructure issues, as you know, with especially with our sewer capacity. So I don't know if anybody has anything in particular that they'd like to talk about going forward, how you can help us with that, what we should be doing. I mean, you did say that if we had any information that we should get in touch with you, but how about what's going to happen with the legislature as far as moving forward with both
Housing.
of those issues? Yeah.
Yeah, on housing, I'd say, Chair Wojcik, first we're going to hear from the governor's bill. So the governor had kind of the first part of this process of a bond bill. Now the last bond bill was it's a 5-year bond bill. We're about 83% or so exhausted from the previous $2.2 billion bond bill. The new one was just filed. We anticipate having a hearing mid-January. And I think what I can do is I touched a little bit on some of the highlights of the $4.3 billion and what the administration wanted to focus on. Certainly a lot of it is on production. So certainly a lot of it is on the recapitalization of these accounts. The cost or the price tag was about double than it was 5 years ago. To somehow know exactly if we're going to have that same number in the House and the Senate, I think my House and Senate colleagues would know that that whole kind of process starts with a public hearing. And I would be more than happy to furnish the membership with the governor's summary of the bill and some of the tools he has in the toolbox for communities, along with some of the capital projects that are in there. I think I said this before, is one of the pieces of it is during the ARPA years, I would guess, like saying the ARPA years now, my goodness, as we come out post-pandemic, when I was touring a lot of housing authorities across the state, a lot of it is kind of, I think they say it's the crisis before the crisis. And so you started to sort of see the lack of investment in public housing over the last few decades and where we are right now. The governor's proposal talks a little bit about the decarbonization, if you will, of moving forward for public housing authorities and housing infrastructure, as well as investing in accessibility for individuals, all individuals across our state, as well as a real investment in modernizing and ensuring that we have things like safe infrastructure and safe air filtration. So those are some of the things I think we can see in our own communities. Certainly, how we can sort of connect our communities to the investment that the governor is looking to do. And from that, I think that's when you work with your legislators through this document and through this process to see what you can do to, help and improve your community, whether that be tools in the toolbox or accessing specific capital for infrastructure in the town of Chelmsford. So what I would suggest is to take a good look at, and my staff would be, or anyone here would be happy to furnish the committee with the language from what the governor had filed. And again, everybody here knows that those things will change, but certainly it's a starting point for the town to look towards things that can help give you tools in the toolbox and provide and produce more affordable housing for everybody.
Jenny,
If I
Just
could
a
just,
follow-up. Sorry.
oh, I'm sorry. Go
It's
on.
just a follow-up question. It's still not clear to me. So what we've been struggling with is supporting the need for housing production and being responsive to mandates that are coming from the state for whether it be refugees, whether it be MBTA zoning or something else in the future, and the corresponding infrastructure needs for that, including sewer, school systems, making sure that we can maintain our green energy community status with whatever's required. And so does this bill have support for that type of infrastructure in it, or is that a separate challenge that needs to be addressed in parallel with the housing production?
Well, there's
goals?
good question, but there's I think I tackled the production issue initially and somewhat tools in the toolbox with the bond bill.
Okay.
But we did touch a little bit about the migrant shelter issue that we're dealing with now. And I think what's on the forefront of individuals' minds here, legislators, community leaders, stakeholders, et cetera, is, for folks that are hosting these families, will there be reimbursements to DESE? Will the federal government move faster with paperwork for, workers' papers, et cetera? Will we get the additional resources that our community uses, McKinley Vento, et cetera? All those things are certainly on our minds, Virginia. And I think that doesn't answer all of your questions, but I think those are all things that supplemental budget looks to sort of help and sort of stop the real press on cities and towns, and to ensure that cities and towns are reimbursed and get the proper resources. When it comes to sewer, I don't have that necessarily in the housing bill, but if my colleagues have something on sewer, I know that we've had that conversation as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Barrett, yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to compliment Representative Arciero. He is one of the real leaders on housing in the legislature, and has done a great deal of prep work that's influenced the particular shape of this submittal by the governor, and he deserves a lot of credit for his efforts. I can tell you that in general, I view the housing issue as weighing on the legislature and state government more than perhaps any other question of the moment. The unemployment rate in the state is low. The job prospects in terms of the local economy are actually quite positive. Their household income is keeping track with inflation. I know it sometimes doesn't feel that way, but actually compensation across the board, including for service workers and frontline workers, has been going up along with the cost of goods. So people are at least staying even and getting at least incrementally ahead. The big issue is this housing question. And while we are siloed, and while there are no comprehensive bills that address everything comprehensively, a governor's agenda can embrace it in general terms, but legislating does take place one major topic at a time, I guess, in order to make it manageable. Otherwise, you would be effectively adopting a state budget multi-program budget on every conceivable issue. So there is a desire to drill down, but if we do the housing piece, and if we can get it passed, it will immediately trigger the need for sewer improvements, the need for transportation improvements. So one forward step does trigger the next. I can appreciate the frustration that you might feel that we don't do it holistically, all in one fell swoop. But you guys, because of the enormous responsibilities you bear, appreciate that these things tend to be done one major question at a time, even though they're interrelated. But I think the sense of urgency here is triggered by several factors that ensure that we won't duck the issue. One is the migrant question that we've already referenced, but the other is these data points. Not a lot of them, but they really make an impression on legislators, suggesting that more people are moving out of the state than are moving in. This question of the affordability of housing. Those data actually only emerged in the last 6 to 9 months. They emerged in the immediate wake, actually, of the November approval of the millionaire's tax. That's when, within 30 days, 60 days of that, you saw this suggestion that people were at least moving out of state legally. They might actually remain resident for much of the year, but some noticeable number of people were at least relocating as a legal matter to other jurisdictions. That has triggered an enormous discussion, and it begins with the ability to afford housing. And whether some people are forced out, we've known for years that people have moved to southern New Hampshire and other places, but commuted to Massachusetts. I don't need to tell you folks about what Route 3 looks like in the morning. So we're really, really riveted on this housing issue for all kinds of reasons, almost comprising a perfect storm. And I think we will get to the question of sewer infrastructure and other supporting infrastructure once we deal with this issue of housing production. Will there be more units available within what we demographically define as Greater Boston? Greater Boston, according to the federal definitions now, include 3 counties in southern New Hampshire. They include several counties in southern Maine. They include all of eastern Massachusetts extending past Worcester. And the definitions expand in that fashion because of commuting patterns, where people live versus where they go to work. So there is a sense that we've got to address the affordability of housing in this expanded notion of Greater Boston, or those numbers registering more move-outs than move-ins are going to continue, and eventually they're going to have a depressing effect on what so far has been a very resilient economy. So I think we'll get there, but it is an inch-by-inch process.
Okay, Simon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Virginia, you mentioned state mandates putting pressure on town government in a number of different areas. Very much appreciate that. And one thing that I've found to be very helpful is getting, when those pressure points happen, getting really down into the specifics about what the state mandate is doing to cause issues in the town. I think housing and particularly migrant shelter is a good example of that. When the migrant shelter opened in Concord, there was no timely reimbursement for out-of-district transportation, and it was going to cause a very significant fiscal issue for the town. But the only reason that we could get to a solution on that, which we did this fall, and it took several months, was because the superintendent gave very specific data on what the costs were going to be. And of course, this is all things that are imposed by the state. So the town and the school district had no agency over what was happening, could only report out that data, but we were able to get DESE to create a pilot program for Concord and 21 other communities to do timely or expedited reimbursement of that out-of-district transportation, which, had that not occurred, it would have created a really big financial issue. So I just use that as an example of when those state mandates are causing those pressure points, to please give us, all of the detail that you can, because all of these things are happening fluidly. And so we can try to craft solutions that will work for Chelmsford, and the more information that we have to do so, the better.
Thank you.
Just to jump off what Representative Cataldo said as well, great point, Representative, and Virginia, thank you for the question too. I mean, I guess housing with a big H, if you will, the larger picture of things, it is going to be a big budget document that's moving forward, and we had that conversation in the outset. As this delegation has worked really well as a team. I'm not going to say there's anything guaranteed as a chair of housing that there's certain things Chelmsford is interested in, but I think that we can have a further conversation on capital needs that Chelmsford will have, and I know there will be some, and specific tools in the toolbox that could possibly address some of the local mandates, if you will. So I guess that's what I was getting at when I talked about the larger picture and the larger infrastructure picture, because it is the goal to create 200,000 more units by the administration and really the legislature to create 200,000 units by 2035 to get up to where we should be.
Thank you.
And I know that, locally, and not just here, but many surrounding communities are also struggling with the MBTA zoning requirements right now, too. And I guess housing is on the top of everybody's mind because of these two things, the migrant crisis and the MBTA zoning. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? I know that
I do.
they are kind of relaxing the requirements on that a little bit, but is there any other thoughts of any other
there wasn't any, so I represent the town of Littleton as well, and they were, I guess it was a week ago now, they had town meeting, and the MBTA communities plan that was supported by the planning board 3-2 actually failed in town meeting by, I think it was under 40 votes. But they're right there. To my understanding, the community is continuing to work together to address some of their needs. I know there were some questions about the master plan and how things were moving forward. But in Littleton too, I think kind of like this whole region, we've always been this hotbed of high-tech growth. We looked during the economic recession. The 110 corridor is one that was growing during a period of time when there was economic downturn. And post-pandemic, I don't think there's anybody watching at home or is listening right now hasn't seen an abandoned office park somewhere in our region, especially 128 over. There's something we'll be working on in the House and Senate, and the administration has it as part of their plan, is to provide incentives for these sort of office parks to, become mixed-use housing. And it's a local and former, a CHS alumni, Salapoli, businessman and developer, who's working on a project in Littleton at the IBM campus. It's 500,000 square feet, and it's going to be up to 1,200 units of housing approved locally with enrollment down at the schools. It's a project that's been embraced by the community. So there's a lot of, Pat, I guess to your question, there's been a lot of sort of looking outside the box. But in terms of the MBTA communities, it's always going to be a work in progress. The more communication the administration has, I think, with communities, the better. Right now in Littleton, I'm setting up sort of a task force that the Secretary of Housing has to work on MBTA community stuff. If Chelmsford has additional questions, I'd be happy to work with you folks to set that up with them as well. But it's a work in progress. I know initially when the zoning was done, there was less controversy, but when the rubber hits the road, it always is. And we understand that, and we understand the great work everyone does there. But if there is something that Chelmsford, we continue to work with the administration. I think some of the frustration too was, remember, in the transition of the Baker administration to the Healy administration, there was sort of a gap when they didn't have a housing secretary. If you remember, they combined the economic development secretary and the housing secretary. So it was kind of tough for communities to have an outlet, have an individual they can connect with in their community, and they can troubleshoot problems. So that's there now. That's established. And I think any of the members of this delegation will be happy to help you set that up.
Okay, thank you. We are running close to an hour that we've been at this, so does anybody have any other questions, specific questions they'd like to address, Paul, or?
Talk about utilities.
Yeah, just a sort of a closing comment and a concern, trying to look forward. Representative Arciero mentioned about the great jump in the housing costs that are facing the Commonwealth for public housing, just in the last decade. And a lot of that was the spike in inflation that you've seen in terms of construction costs. And then, Senator Barrett, you referenced the fact of the inflationary aspects, but also the rising wage aspect that sort of is kept with that. The concern that the towns have, and trying to look forward, is 75% of our revenue comes from the property tax. And we're regulated by Proposition 2.5. And Proposition 2.5 worked well the last generation because inflation was running at 2%. But right now, when inflation ran 7% and is running 4%, and we want to provide our employees with a fair living wage, but if that fair living wage is 4% and Proposition 2.5 is 2.5%, you can see the imbalance. And I guess the question is sort of leaving here is I know you'll be taking up the revenue estimates next month and the beginning of the FY25 budget process. That's a concern for cities and towns. And I know it is in Westford. I talked to Kristen Lass as recently as this afternoon. I know it's a concern in other communities. How does it work for cities and towns where there's no prospect of selling a Proposition 2.5 override, including Chelmsford and other communities? However, you've got the imbalance of the inflationary aspects that are crushing us in terms of trying to meet costs, whether it's for labor, services such as trash removal, disposal, utilities, and so forth, not to mention our infrastructure. We started our capital planning process last week. Normally, we're looking, we run a $4 million investment annually, and our requests come in at, $6 million or so. Well, this year they came in at $11.2 million, and looking at $10 million over the out years. And so I guess the question or the concern or the request is looking forward, is there some way that, and I know the state's got 4 months of declining revenue forecast as well, but that's the concern because all of these items that we've talked about, the housing, the migrants, we didn't even touch on the MBTA other than MBTA zoning, but there's really an MBTA problem, as you know. But I think the question for cities and towns is, and you'll hear this over the next few months, and I know you're already hearing about it in some of the communities, is how do cities and towns meet this fiscal challenge? Because having been in this business for 34 years now, this is the most concerning environment that I've seen since the Great Recession back over 15 years ago in terms of the fiscal challenge or that's coming to cities and towns. And I just want you to be aware of that now, because this isn't a Chelmsford problem, but it is a Chelmsford problem, but it's a municipality problem.
Well, thank you
Great
for
point, Paul.
laying it out
Sorry,
so effectively, so well. I don't have any perfect answer because this is a dilemma that we're going to be wrestling with at every level of government, including the federal level, even though at times it seems like it's not contributing too much. We hear you, and I just want to thank you for articulating it well. I will say, not because I want to understate the challenge, which is real, but it does now look as if the economy is going to affect this so-called soft landing. It looks as if inflation is definitely tracking lower now. That's not to say that we haven't settled in at a higher level with all the attendant problems you mentioned, but inflation seems unlikely to continue. According to national commentary, that's a very good thing. The unemployment rate here remains low, which means that we didn't have to stimulate unemployment in order to stop spending in order to contain inflation. That the genius of the soft landing, which is seldom pulled off, but which seems upon us now, is that you curb the increase in prices without throwing people out of work. It does seem as if that's going to be there. So we're going to look back on this period, and still you're left with an increased cost foundation that we have to help you address. but people in Chelmsford are working. People throughout Massachusetts are working. There's an enormous demand for labor. Everywhere you look, there are labor shortages. That's difficult in many respects, but it's a better problem than a labor surplus, which is when people can't find means of sustaining themselves. So this is a tough situation, but it's not the worst we've encountered in our professional lives. What we do have to help the towns and cities cope with the ratcheting up in labor costs and other costs, supply chain costs that they've seen. But it does seem as if we're going to hold on to our job base, which in the end means we're going to hold on to most of our revenue base. And we're not going to see what we saw in 2008, which is significant amounts of job loss. So it's a mixed bag, but you're absolutely right to underline the challenges.
Jim, did you have anything you want to add to that?
Oh, no. The senator said it great. I was just going to say, certainly those are concerns with inflation, with our revenue numbers in October. As we move forward now, I think we're going to have those conversations with the budget. And I think everybody in this room knows as well, Paul, to your point too, there's no more ARPA money. Okay. So there's going to be some challenges. And I think when the budget process comes, these are going to be serious issues that city towns are working with. And I appreciate you making note of that. And it's going to be something that's on our minds moving forward.
Okay, we have so many other things that we could talk about. Virginia briefly mentioned the utilities. We have National Grid coming in very shortly tonight to talk about double poles. That's something that we wanted to see if we could get your help on, but not tonight, obviously.
We won't talk about it tonight, but I think there may be some progress possible on the double polling issue. I'm a cautious optimist, actually, if we have a climate bill that we might be able to do.
Okay, and that was another thing, the environment and climate, yeah, we didn't get to talk about that at all. So if we could, set a meeting, another opportunity for you to come in, maybe in another 6 months, maybe next May. I think it was May you were here last, so, that seems to work well, twice a year. I don't think we have our meeting scheduled yet, but we can check with you on dates in next May, maybe early in the month, for you to come back and hopefully some of these issues that are so high priority now will be settled down a little bit so we can get a more wide-ranging discussion. But again, thank you so much for coming, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having
Have a
us.
wonderful holiday.
Okay, next on our agenda is public input. If anybody has anything they would like to talk to the board about this
Sue
evening.
Olson's on for public input, I believe.
Okay, has she raised her hand?
She went back off.
Yeah, she's just
Yeah.
turning on camera.
Okay.
Oh, gee, sorry.
Okay, Sue, you're first up.
Sorry. Yes, can you hear me? No.
Yes.
No, you just muted yourself, so try unmuting yourself. Okay, there you go. There you are.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to thank the legislative delegation for all the work that they've done, especially Representative Elliott, Senator Barrett. All four of them have done a great job on helping us with the truck traffic issues. I was able to attend the hearing today in Boston, and it was a little of an adventure, but I just think, for them to show such support for our town is something that I really appreciate. That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board about anything this evening? Okay, nobody in this room? Paul, anybody else on Zoom?
No.
No. Okay, thank you very much. All right, ready to go to committee vacancies.
Okay, so the following committees have openings. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has 1 3-year term. The Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee has 1 expired 3-year term available. The Commission on Disabilities has 2 unexpired 3-year terms, 1 unexpired 3-year term, and 1 3-year term available. The Community Action Program Committee has one unexpired 3-year term. The Council on Aging has one unexpired 3-year term and one 3-year term open. The Cultural Council has 2 3-year terms open. The Historic District Commission has one unexpired 3-year term. The Holiday Decorating Committee has one unexpired 1-year term. The Parade Committee welcomes all applicants for 1-year terms. The Roberts Field Advisory Committee has 2 unexpired 3-year terms, and the Tree Committee has 1 unexpired 3-year term available. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an online application available on the town website. And for more information, you can contact the town manager's office at 978-250-5202 or tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov.
And I'd also just like to note that we just found out about it late last week, but there is an upcoming vacancy on the Neshoba Valley Technical High School Committee, and we are anticipating doing an appointment for that open position at a joint meeting with the school committee on December 11th. So if you have any interest in that, you can also apply through the website or the town manager's office, and there is a notification about it on the town website to get more information on that. Okay, so we're ready to move on to licenses. First up is the change of manager on Rushi Hospitality, the Element by Weston. Anybody here? Okay, if you want to come up.
Hello.
Okay, if you could identify yourself.
Sure. My name is Katie Blake.
Okay. And you become the new manager?
Yes.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for Katie about this change of manager?
I don't.
She's also the manager at the other hotel as well.
Okay.
Just so you're aware, yeah.
Okay.
So we have a track record.
Okay, and you're going to spend 40 hours at each? Is that your plan?
Yeah, I split my day between all the hotels, so, but,
It's a short drive.
yeah,
There you go.
exactly.
Okay, and is George still on the
He
on the
is,
call?
Yes,
he is.
Do you have any questions?
No?
I don't think so.
All right. So we'll take a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the change of manager on the all alcoholic beverages hotel innkeeper license for Rush Hill Hospitality doing business as Element by Weston at 25 Research Place as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Given that one of our members is participating remotely, we do have to do a roll call vote. So George, I'll ask for your vote first.
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's 4-0. You're all set?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is a roadside vendor's license for Almo's Flower and Garden Center at Sully's.
Andy Daigle is on remotely
Oh,
for
okay.
this license.
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, this is Andy Daigle from Almo's, looking for a roadside license for Sully's on Graniteville Road again, for Christmas trees, kiss and balls, and decorations.
Okay, you've been doing this for a while, right?
Yeah, long time, over 10 years, I think.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Daigle about this roadside vendor license?
I do not.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the roadside vendor license for Almost Flower and Garden Center, Inc. at 55 Graniteville Road for the period of November 24th through December 24th, 2023, as presented.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Again, we'll have a roll call vote. George?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's 4-0. So, good luck, Mr. Daigle.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we have an update on the,
I hope there's somebody present, either remotely
Oh.
or in the room.
Okay,
Is
there-
that Vsauce? Jordan?
okay, we're expecting an update about Canissa.
Vsauce iPad just unmuted.
Yeah, I have it on now.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if you could identify yourself and give us an update on
Yes,
where things
my name
stand.
is Christopher Nguyen. I am the owner of the 133 Penson Street. And right now we encounter the condition, and therefore we're going to resume in the springtime. And the ETA is going to be late September and early October of next year, 2024.
Remember, this was the pocket license. that
Right,
we
it was
held.
supposed to have been 9
Yes.
months, right.
We're talking another year.
I think that's a discussion that the board will have to have about whether to allow you to maintain that license without a building in which to use it. I don't know if anybody wants to make any comments now, or we can hold off on that. I mean, this is the first I've heard that, what the status going forward is going to be. I mean, that
So
will be.
the purpose of tonight is to understand the status, and then we would take it up for discussion in December when the licenses are up for renewal.
I would say
Right,
that.
the idea being that we have the full license review next month, next meeting, and where this was an outlier, we wanted to bring it to the board's attention early so you could at least hear from the applicant in terms of where they're at, where they think they're going, and, because it just may be too crowded next meeting. So just wanted to at least, thought it'd be helpful to get them in early.
Does anybody have any questions at this time for Ms. Roth about this?
Sir, in the event that we do continue the license, would you be willing to give us periodic updates?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
I mean, because what we're hearing, and I'm going to jump in, but what we're hearing is the design of the building is changing. I don't know if that's
okay.
true or not, but if that's the case, then you'd have to modify the license.
Okay.
Because you remember, you did a pocket license on a plan that was, remember, showing a two-story building
Right.
next to Princeton Station at that location. What I'm hearing from the inspectors is that part of the reason for this delay is that they're redesigning that building. And so again, we want to make sure everybody's going in with full information, and I don't know if he is prepared to comment on this evening, but I just want to let him know and obviously remind the board that if the layout and design of that building changes, then that's going to require a whole licensing hearing process, because that's not what the board approved. And so, again, I'll just leave it at that. As I'm saying, this is why this gets real complicated and sticky, because you issued the license for the calendar year 2023, and
Right.
now you're being asked to approve a license for 24.
But we
But
don't
the
know what
question
we're
is
approving.
what is it that's being approved? Because we saw from the inspection basis, the delay in the demo and removal of the former structure. And in fact, it took letters from the town inspector ordering the structure to be removed. Now that's occurred. And again, we're not seeing the permit or construction activity for what was permitted, but now we're hearing that the plans and design may be changing. And I understand that it's a changed market in the last year with interest rates and the economy and so forth. But I just, again, so that there isn't any, friction or misunderstanding, is that something is maybe changing, and I wanted the board to be aware of that, and that was why we asked them to come in and give a status update this evening.
So could we get comment from the owner directly on that, and what is exactly resuming in the spring?
Yes, the springtime will start the construction.
Well, I
Because winter time, according to the GC, is not very good.
No, I understand you're starting construction in the spring, but is it a different design than what was approved on the current license?
Yeah, yes, I think it's going to be the same, but just we're going to change the foundation. So we're going to have the first floor and the second floor, but no foundation, because of the water table is high.
So the only change to the building would be instead of having a basement, you're going to have a slab foundation and then a two-story
That is
building?
correct. That is correct, sir.
So I'm not familiar with this because I wasn't here at the time either. So I really have
Speak up.
very little concept of what is going on right now, actually.
You know the location, right, next to Princeton
Right,
Station?
Yeah, I know. I just caught it. Yes,
Right, next to Princeton Station, there was the
Yeah.
old building with the X that was there forever.
Yeah.
They came in, they transferred the license from Vinyl Square,
Yeah,
which is now closed.
yeah.
and with the premise that they were going to construct a building with the basement and 2 stories.
Yeah, but I haven't seen, I did not approve, I
Right,
haven't seen
right.
those
So I
plans,
just-
so.
and what I've been hearing from the inspectors is that they were modifying the design of the building, but now we're hearing the only
They're just
design change is going to be
removing the basement.
there'll be no basement,
Yeah.
which was not part of the layout of the square footage of the location when the board approved it.
And sir, do you have the plans for this new design that you can bring to us?
My architect is working on it right now.
Okay, could you come to our next meeting, which would be on December 4th?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, because, at least to update the one board member who was not here the last time you came before us, and maybe to refresh our memories about what it will look like and what we did approve, and then maybe we may have more questions at that time about what's going to happen over the next year.
And
Yes.
if you could include in the packet, Paul, what was approved.
Yeah, we will. We'll do that, yeah.
And then if the owner could include what your new plans are, that would be very helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, any other questions at this time?
George, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, George. Okay, so that, we'll do it for that at this time. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is National Grid double pole continued discussion. Do we have anybody on here from National Grid?
Hi, I'm Laura Kelleher. I'm here from National Grid. I work in the third-party department, and I am here to report on the double poles. So I did send over a report last week, and overall, there's still 78 open tickets in the engine system. In the last month, since October 1st, we have closed a total of 59 tickets.
So does this 78 include the page that says added tickets, October and November?
It does. So the total includes the additions. It's just, I break it down so that you can see, there's been movement that's occurred. So there's been poles that have been removed, but there's also poles being added regularly. So every time there's a new pole set, a double pole is born. So it's a rolling, sort of a rolling target that we're trying to finish up.
And Paul, there were, go ahead.
Yeah, but the project that sort of generated a lot of this is at completion, correct? I mean, the poles have all been set for the closure of the previous substation, which generated a lot of the poles that you have been added to the list, correct? There's no more. There's no more to come, correct?
There shouldn't be, no, at this point, no.
So you won't see the total added in the future. I guess the question I have, Laura, and this was a question I asked at the last meeting a month ago, and maybe even before that, is we appreciate National Grid's efforts on that. I think anyone who drives down now Billerica Road, still from the center to the town offices, will see the double poles lined up.
13,
and we understand National Grid has done its work, and we're waiting. And the town of Chelmsford is contracting. I know we had our vendor out there today doing work. But I guess the question from National Grid, because you basically show that there's only a dozen or so basically in the ball of the court of National Grid in terms of National Grid being the first to act. And I guess the question I have is, how do we resolve those long-standing items? That are the double poles that have been there for we're talking years. How do we resolve those? I think we're on top of, and we'll address the ones that are created from this project that were instituted within the last several months. But how do we get the stubborn ones out of the system, particularly and obviously National Grid can only control the ones that are in your court.
So I know for other towns, one thing that I do is I have a relationship with all of the third-party applicants. So I have a weekly meeting with Comcast. I have a weekly meeting with Light Tower, TC Sienna. So all of those third-party groups that attach to our poles, I have regular conversations with them. So one of the reasons why Curtis brought my team in was because we have those relationships, and I can reach out and I can set up a meeting for myself to send a monthly email requesting updates specifically for Chelmsford, if that's
Right, but-
something that you'd be interested in.
You may have just missed my point a little bit. I understand that, but my question is the ones that National Grid needs to act upon. We've got double poles that go back to 22 to 19 to, multiple years. 2016. How do we get National Grid to initiate in some of those? Like I said, double poles that are stuck, and those are the ones that residents get most frustrated with, are the ones that have been there for prolonged periods of time, in this case, years. And obviously they would be the only ones that are in National Grid's ball and National Grid's court because they're not recent, they're long-standing, and we just, for the years that we've been trying to do this, those are the ones that we can't seem to get action on. And I'm sure they're not just because they're simple, but how do we get those double poles removed?
I can take a look into those. Are you referencing the 12 that are currently assigned to National Grid?
Yes.
Okay.
And
I'll take a
particularly
deeper
the ones
look
that
into
particularly ones that don't have 2023 on them. In other words, as the
Yeah.
year that they exist, and those are the ones that I think we've been trying to get at for some time.
And the rest are Verizon. The rest of the
but-
older ones are,
Right.
yeah.
Because if it's still in National Grid's court, there's one of two things. Either the data is wrong, and therefore nobody's been able to find or locate the double poles, or there's something that's stubborn about those double poles, which is why National Grid is not moving to eliminate those. Because the next vendor, as you know, can't take action until National Grid does its work.
Yes. So I will take a deeper dive into that, and I can report back on our next meeting about those specific 12.
I have a question too. It looks like you did a good job in October closing 58. Why were there only a few in November? So far, only a couple.
That's what I was able to provide. That's what was closed in engines.
Well, what's today?
So, I mean, there's only, I can reach out and I can ask people to transfer, but I don't have control over other companies' timelines, unfortunately.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question. So there was 50 added in October, and we're thinking that most of those are from that project. So how many would
number
you
9.
expect to see going forward on a monthly basis outside of that project? Like a handful? Ballpark.
It would, I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I know from my department in particular, I don't have a lot of Chelmsford work that is upcoming for new communications attachments.
So maybe just a couple here and
Yeah.
there is pretty
Yeah.
average.
Well, it shows just 4 added in November, so.
Yeah, so something like that. Yeah.
Well, the other concern you're going to see is the weather conditions. You're going into the winter months. You're not going to have the roads can't be open for them
Yeah.
to do new projects. And if we start getting snowbanks and other things,
Yeah.
it's going to be difficult for any vendor, whether it's the town or National Grid, Verizon, the third parties, to get to those poles
Yeah.
to do the work.
To
And so
close them, yeah.
That's the urgency we're running into.
Okay, so I know we are heading into the bad weather, and I guess the expectation would be that the process may slow down somewhat. When do we want to see somebody from National Grid again to talk about this? Maybe,
You want to move it to January?
I'd say at least January, yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Do we want to see next month, though? That because we have such a short window of time where they can get a lot done before we do kind of get that snow? Do we want to see what kind of progress they've made next month, maybe?
Do you have any,
Because after next month, there won't be
Okay.
too much, right?
well,
It depends.
Depends on the winter
depends on,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was just thinking with the holidays and stuff, maybe there's just a little breathing space
Yep.
to.
Yep, that's true.
So,
What makes sense to you, Laura?
If you want, I can provide updates for your meeting next month. And if you want me there, I can also be there. So I can make time to be here if that's important to you.
So we have a meeting on the 14th, I mean, the
The
18th, right? December
December.
8th. December 18th.
Okay. I can be there.
Okay,
That'd be great, thank you.
all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to take one item out of order right now because we don't know how long we're going to have George Dixon here with us, and it does require a vote.
Not feeling
Tonight.
well. He's not feeling well.
So I'm going to step away, and
Sure.
Virginia's going to handle this part of the meeting. Maybe she'll do a better job.
Paul, do you want to present this?
Sure,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Members of the board, this is a follow-up from town meeting, and again, this requires an action by the board. One of the action items at town meeting was the approval of the purchase of the sale of a parcel off of Elm Street, 1.15 acres, and town council has drafted a purchase and sale agreement for this parcel, which, obviously equates to the parcel that was approved at town meeting and the appropriation at town meeting. And so what needs to occur at this point, it's been signed by the sellers, and we need the board's vote and approval and signatures on the purchase and sale agreement and the associated rider for this document. So that's the parcel at Elm Street.
Do we have any questions?
No.
George, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, if not, I'll take a motion.
So I will make a motion to approve the purchase and sale agreement and the associated riders related to the purchase of the Elm Street parcel at map 154, block 462, lot 19.
Map 124.
124.
Map
124.
124. My apologies.
I'll
Block
second that.
462, lot 19.
Okay, we have a second by George. I'll do a roll call vote. George?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Great, thank you.
3-0 with one abstent, or Pat not voting.
Okay, next up is our tax classification public hearing, and I just want to go through the process for anyone who hasn't gone through this process before or doesn't remember how we handle it. Tonight, we will have the chief assessor give us a report that we need in order to make our decision on tax classification. After that time, we'll open the public hearing for any comments from anyone who wants to make comments about tax classification or taxes in general. And then we will continue this public hearing until our next meeting to give others an opportunity to give us any other feedback that they would like to at that time. And the expectation would be that we would receive any other public input at our next meeting, any answers to any questions that can't be answered this evening, and we will take our vote at our next meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to, I guess, Sam, is it you that's going to begin the presentation?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm Sam Chase, representing the Board of Assessors at this hearing. We are obviously here, as the slide says, to have our annual tax classification hearing. This is required every year. The purpose of the hearing is to provide an open forum for the public discussion of the tax policy. Public hearing means, obviously, that citizens from the community can get up and they can weigh in on this issue, so we would expect that to happen as well. And as the chair has stated, the process is that a vote will be taken at a later time after the board has had the materials presented to them and they've had a chance to consider the matter. Just a little bit of background on who the assessors are and what we do and how we get to this point. Assessors in Chelmsford are appointed by the town manager for a 3-year term. Currently, Sam Chase and Jack Duffett are serving on the board. The town manager appoints a chief assessor who manages the day-to-day assessing operations. The property valuation process itself is based on standards that are established by the American Appraisal Institute and are governed by Massachusetts law. Residential properties are valued using the construction cost and sales review methods together. Commercial properties are valued using the cost, sales, and income capitalization methods together. This is a matter of state law. This is specified in the statutes. After that activity is completed, the results are checked using standardized statistical testing methods to arrive at a market value for a specific property type. The Department of Revenue then reviews the assessor's work and must certify that all real estate values meet the legal standard of being at full and fair cash value before a uniform tax rate can be finalized. It's important for the public to realize that the assessors do not set the property tax rate. A uniform tax rate is calculated by dividing the amount that is to be raised from the tax levy by the total certified value of real and personal property in town that is subject to taxation. After that determination is made, the Select Board then decides whether that uniform rate will apply or whether commercial and residential properties will be taxed at different rates, which is the so-called classified or split rate tax approach. Tonight's public hearing is the beginning of that process. On behalf of our board, I want to express our gratitude to Frank and his very capable staff for the outstanding work that they do to ensure that residents are treated fairly and courteously. Residents who have questions concerning property valuations should feel very comfortable in contacting the assessor's office at 978-250-5220. Frank and his staff are always available to assist you. So we have the slide presentation up on the board now, and I believe we're on slide number 3. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what you see on that slide. We're going to be talking about the methods and application for how the valuations are done. The chief assessor will give you a summary of the various exemptions that are applicable in this particular case. We consider every year, the Select Board considers every year whether or not to grant a small commercial exemption. They can also consider whether to grant residential exemptions or an open space discount exemption. So that's something that the board takes up during its annual consideration, and the chief assessor will speak more to the technicalities of those particular things. You see a summary before you of the abatement activity that we had for the previous year. Those are the numbers, and it's worth noting that the 46% compliance rate that we have for return of the income and expense forms from the commercial property owners is substantially higher than the statewide average, which it runs around 25%. So we're at about 46%, and for the last 10 years or so, we've been between 45 and 50%. Several years ago, the Chelmsford Business Association actively engaged in that process and reached out to many of the commercial property owners in town, encouraging them to please complete those forms because they are critical in helping the assessor's office establish the market for the commercial properties. So at this point, I would like to turn the balance of the presentation over to Frank, and he will walk you through the technical aspects.
Thank you very much, Sam. Well, the first thing to consider that the Select Board has to consider, as Sam said, there are 4 things to consider: splitting the tax rate, the residential exemption, small commercial exemption, and the open space discount. First one we're going to discuss is the residential exemption. This is not a very common exemption. None of them are. This is only utilized by 18 communities in the Commonwealth. And basically, it's a shift within the residential class. It basically takes the average assessed value for all rural residential properties, regardless whether it's a single family or multi, and anything below that value, in this case, Chelmsford is roughly $560,000, which you'll see is considerably less than the average single-family home. But the average residential parcel, including vacant land and everything, is roughly $560,000. Any parcel below that that is not owner-occupied receives an exemption if the exemption is voted on. It only, this particular exemption only occurs within the income, the commercial, industrial, and personal property are unaffected by this particular exemption. Only within the residential does this exist. It can be up to 35% of the assessed value. It can be applied to residential parcels that is owner-occupied by the principal place of the address as of the income tax purposes. Can be granted in addition to any other allowable exemption, but they're speaking mostly of statutory exemptions. As I said, $562,000 is the average residential value. Again, that's all parcels. Next, small commercial. This is one that Chelmsford in 2019, fiscal 2019, enacted. This is a similar exemption as residential, except it exists within the commercial. You could be up to 10% for eligible parcels. Eligible parcel would be a commercial property that's valued at $1 million or less with 10 or fewer full-time employees. The intent of it is to help smaller valued properties, $1 million or less. We have maybe 260, I think 250 parcels that did qualify in the past year. I don't have that exact number. I'll have it in a couple of weeks. The exemption is passed on to the property owner, not necessarily the tenants, even though it's the tenants or the lease people that really enable the homeowner or the property owner to receive the exemption. The Director of Department of Unemployment Assistance furnishes the Board of Assessors with a list of all businesses that have 10 or fewer people that are at that location. They are that's an exact list. However, anything mentioned in that list would receive the exemption, assuming the building is less than $1 million. We then do quite a bit of research to see if there are others out there not included on that list that might qualify. The minimum residential factor is something that is established, as Sam said, by the Department of Revenue. They determine what would be the maximum allowable split, should the board so decide to split the rate. In Chelmsford's case, that's 50%. We could split the rate no greater than 50% for now. If Chelmsford were to continue to split the rate, there could be a time where it could go up greater than the 50% like Bill Ricker and Lowell enjoy. This sheet here, believe it or not, we've had since 2019, it's 5 years. With fiscal 24, that's the 6th year that we'd be potentially looking at a split rate. So we've had it for 5 years now. So I thought it was worth a look back of where we are, where we've been during these 5 years. And if you look to the column to the far right there, percent change, you'll see that the typical increase was 5%, with exception, as noted, in fiscal 19, obviously it was greater because that was the first year we had the split, and the COVID relief year of fiscal 21, I think it was, which provided excess levy capacity, bringing the increase rather low. So you can see right now, if everything was stable, that is to say if we kept the 20%, all things being equal, the typical increase would be a little over 4%, whereas the typical increase past years was a 5%.
That's the percent change for the average tax increase for residents?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Single-family bill, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Every single family.
Some of the notes below are kind of interesting. From 22 to 23, the average single-family value increase was $76,000. I think I had that on the sheet last year. I found that remarkable. And when you consider all the past years, and on the other spreadsheets, I went back even further. You can see that 15% was just unprecedented. In the past years, since 2009, it was only roughly 3%, a little over 3%, or $11,800. The average sale price from single family from 22 to 23 went from 522 to 627. 23 to 24, 627 to $684,000. For fiscal 24, calendar 22, the average single-family sale was $684,000 is what that's saying.
Where do I find that number on this chart?
It's on the chart, it's on the notes at the bottom on number 9.
Last line of the
Okay, because
slide.
I'm looking at the table, and they're not the same numbers that you're citing, so I'm just confused at
682,000.
what I'm looking at.
Because one number is sale price, the other one is assessed value.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Right.
the
They're
table,
diff-
the
they
table
differ.
is assessed value?
Yes.
And
Correct.
the footnotes at the bottom are sale price?
Correct.
And we tax on assessed value, not sale price.
Thank you.
Slide 10 is a slide we've had for quite a few years now. It's a number of towns that surround Chelmsford or were similar to Chelmsford. It kind of shows since 2010, the average increases over that time frame. It also notes the very top row, split rates, if there were any for those communities, because that would actually skew the numbers a little bit. And it basically shows that Chelmsford, I think it's sort of right in the middle. If you can see, it's 3.52% over that time frame. I think the highest 5.3, which would be Tewksbury.
Our percent change in residential property taxes is 3.52%.
In the average single-family tax bill, yes.
This is, the next one is you can see a very busy sheet here. And this shows at 120, well, highlighted at 120 because that's where we are for the past couple of years, the increase. The residential factor is the factor that when the board does take a vote, they would cite as whichever increase or decrease they wish to go with. This shows, again, the 1.683 is a typical commercial property, the 682,800 to the left is the residential average. And then the 300,000 or 400,000 is just another assessment, a condo, if you will, at $300,000 or $400,000. This last sheet is shows kind of as a condensed version of the sheet we had before, going from 100 single tax rate to a 120. It eliminates the busyness of the previous sheet. It shows a typical increase, and right down at the bottom of the column to around the fourth one from the right, the 4.16, and some of the other increases we've had over time. This is just a condensed version. I thought it might be a little bit more readable. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Frank or Sam at this time?
Frank, my understanding from previous conversations is in communities where they have held a split tax rate, one of the factors that they may look at is to make a decision on what that split should be is holding constant the residential factor. Is that correct?
That's right. Tewksbury, I think, does that.
Tewksbury, Maynard, and Littleton do it.
Okay, so I don't know if this would be useful to just tabularize for the next meeting, because I was trying to wrap my head around that a little bit, and I went and I looked back at since we've had the split rate, right? So in 2019, the residential factor was 0.943. And then in 2020, we dropped the split a little bit, but the residential factor went up to 0.95. And then in 2021, we held it, and the residential factor went up to 0.956. And then in 2022, I think we dropped it again to 1.2,
Yeah.
but the residential factor went up another point to 0.96. It went up pretty significantly from the previous year. So is that meaningful data to look at from our standpoint? And if so, could we either add that to the table from the historical? Because I don't see that in these historical
Can I answer
tables.
that? Hopefully I can answer a little bit of your question. So you go back to 2019, and if I heard you correctly, I think the split roughly back then, just based on what you said, it was roughly 80-20. Is that right?
No, it was actually more drastic than that. It was
That previous slide, if you go back
at 1.27.
Okay.
The residential factor was 0.9433. And all I'm saying is, we have at 1.2 last year, the residential factor was higher than that. The split was lower, but the
Because
residential
what we have
factor.
each and every year, what we have, of course, is values changing, commercial, industrial, personal property as well as residential.
You have a natural shift.
So there's a,
Right.
so what I think Ken kind of touched on this, if we're talking about the same sort of thing, and what I know Tewksbury tries to do is, they want to keep either a tax amount, the typical tax amount going up maybe no more than several percent, or having the residential retain whatever it is, an 80% of the overall, and that's what they would target. So what I did was I created a spreadsheet that does that. Each year,
Right, I remember that.
was that, huh?
I remember that.
Yep, so you could, whoever was active, was interactive in that, you could put it whatever number you wanted. If you wanted the residential to have an 80%, carry 80% of the burden, then it would give, if it required a split rate, it would indicate that.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to provide that again, because Aaron doesn't have it, that would be useful, but it's kind of off my question. I want to make sure I'm interpreting this correctly. Last year, in 2022, and this is why I'm asking if it would be, I think it would be helpful to have a table in here that shows historically what the residential factor was correlating to the levy shift. So last year, it was 1.20, and the residential factor was 0.9635. This year, if we do nothing and leave it at 1.20, the residential factor is about the same, which is 0.96374.
Yep. Okay.
I mean, it's another data point that says, what's the sensitivity to that over the years, and how much have we haven't really come very far off that 0.96. So
Sure, I can provide that to you.
is that that reasonable data to look at in factoring? It's
In my
one of the
opinion, no,
trade
only
spaces,
because
right?
these numbers will vary each and every year. Like you say, even if we hold the 120, the number will change just because the commercial.
Property taxes. went up.
Exactly.
Right, the value's going up.
Exactly right, yeah.
It's going to go up no matter what.
Probably not to the
But
extent
it's-
that it has the last couple of
But
years.
you're going to get a
It's gonna go up
net.
no matter what, but it's the proportion that you're talking
Right,
about.
and you're going to get a natural shift depending on the market. So one
Right.
year, your residential properties might go up 10%, your commercial might go up 5%. The next year, residents may go up 6%, commercials may go up 10%. And if that happens, you're going to get natural shift without the impact of a split. So that has to factor into it as
Right.
well.
Right. And there could be a year, let's just suppose we want to keep it at 0.96. There could be a year where that says, oh, that's not a 1.2, it's a
Exactly.
1.15, or it's a
Exactly.
1.6. I
Yep.
mean, it wouldn't be that drastic, but,
Yep, you're
That-
exactly right.
okay, so, I mean, I think it would just be helpful to have that.
Sure.
So people could look at it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Aaron, you have any? Okay. George, do you have any questions?
No, fine, thank you.
Okay. So this is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the room that would like to make any comments about tax classification? Okay, I don't see anybody. Anybody on Zoom, Paul?
No, not seeing anything on Zoom.
You want a motion? I will make a motion to continue the tax classification public hearing to December 4th, 2023.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing. George?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that's 4-0. We will see both of you gentlemen again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, reports and presentations.
You're welcome to stand or sit, whichever you're most comfortable with.
I got all my notes,
I
so.
didn't want you to feel obligated. Been sitting for a while.
Yeah, it's all good. It's interesting stuff. So it's rare I get to come to one of these, so it's actually kind of nice. So good evening. I'm Jessica Porter, 5 Milestone Avenue, and I'm here presenting this evening as the chair of the Personnel Board. So I wanted to brief all of you on our recent meeting on October 18th.
Excuse me, People in the back, could you either leave or quiet? Thank you. Okay, Jessica, sorry about that.
That's okay. As I was saying, I wanted to brief the Select Board on our recent meeting from October 18th, where the Personnel Board discussed kind of 4 different topics. I will go through each one, and then certainly I can entertain any questions that the board may have. So the first item discussed was the review of a new proposed classification and compensation study for the town. This was performed by an outside independent consultant called HR Key Solutions. The proposed plan covered a new classification study for all 37.5 and 40-hour non-union positions with the town. The new plan brings all of our positions to a fair and competitive level compared to other positions both within the marketplace and also amongst our fellow municipal employers. The Personnel Board believes that this new plan will assist greatly with recruitment efforts and, more importantly, the retention of our existing employees. The study was typical and consistent with pay studies that are performed by consultants on a routine basis amongst municipalities, and the result was the Personnel Board agreed to the proposed pay plan and voted unanimously to approve it. The second item discussed was a review of some changes, most of them minor or housekeeping, to the town's personnel rules and regulations. Some of the changes that we reviewed were adding of the Juneteenth holiday to the list of holidays. We put some parameters around definitions on floating holidays and providing for any recognized holiday which falls on a Saturday such that the town can remain open for business on the Friday prior. So a recent example of that is Veterans Day. It recently fell on a Saturday. This would allow the town to be open the Friday before, but employees would still get the benefit of a paid holiday to be taken at another time, thus allowing business to still be open and functioning on that Friday. We changed some wording regarding the affirmative action plan to instead reflect efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion in our hiring and promotional practices. We made note that for recruitment purposes, we'll be utilizing professional websites and associations for advertising to get the biggest reach possible. We've formally noted that we'll include drug screens as part of the pre-employment medical process. This is actually something that's already been in place with the town. This is just formalizing it within the rules and regulations so everybody's aware. Some other general housekeeping changes. Throughout the document, it was referred to as Board of Selectmen, so to be consistent, we changed all those references to Select Board. And then some of the more substantial ones are to allow for a long-term disability plan funded by the town after an employee has exhausted all of their own accrued leave, and also allowing employees to supplement any workers' compensation payments with their own accrued time so as to remain whole with their weekly pay. So currently, workers' compensation gives you about 60% pay. This would allow employees to use their own time for that other 40%, thus having no loss in pay. So again, the rules and regulations are primarily for non-union. Obviously, our unionized employees are all covered under collective bargaining agreements. Wherever a collective bargaining agreement is silent on something, then the rules and regulations would cover those topics. And then the last 2 items are 2 new policies. Oh, and I'm sorry, the Personnel Board agreed to all of the proposed edits. We did have some questions and discussion, particularly around the disability piece, but ultimately our questions were answered and we all unanimously voted to adopt those changes. And then the last 2 are 2 new policies. One is a social media policy. This addresses general governance of any official town-sanctioned social media sites by employees and those entrusted to post and manage on those sites. These types of policies are mainstream in the municipal world and offer protections to the town by way of ensuring consistent messaging and also ensuring appropriateness of any town-sanctioned content that's being disseminated to the public. And then the last policy was a remote work program policy and procedure. This policy addresses the allowance of remote work, including a process for which folks can apply and an approval-based process upon position appropriateness, and also ensures no changes to service delivery to the residents. The board felt that this is a necessary policy in order to remain competitive in the marketplace as more employees are offering some type of remote work arrangements. The policy will not provide for full-time remote work, but allowing this policy will provide employees who apply and are accepted into the the remote work plan to have some flexibility when needed. This policy was modeled after one that has currently been adopted by other municipalities and has been under discussion in many more municipalities. So after discussion on both of these policies, the Personnel Board voted unanimously to adopt both. And that is the summary of our meeting from the 18th. I'm open to any questions any of the board members may have.
Any questions, Virginia? No?
Is there anywhere you need support from this board?
I don't think so, not at this juncture. We've got great leadership in Town Manager Cohen and the HR Director, working very collaboratively and keeping our board informed. So, I will say as a municipal servant myself that these are very much in line with what all of our municipalities out there are doing, particularly with the pay piece. Certain positions are getting more and more difficult to recruit for. Engineers is a good example. So making sure that we have, the support for putting competitive pay and benefits out there is going to be huge if we're going to attract and retain those candidates.
Erin, any questions? George, any questions? Any questions for Jessica?
No, thank you.
Do Paul and Jessica, do we track our retention data at all?
Not formally, no.
I mean, we don't seem to have a huge issue with
Right.
retention.
No. Well,
Are you seeing any trends in that area?
our bigger concerns are retirement. I mean, that's what we're seeing.
Attrition?
Yeah, attrition. Yeah,
Right.
basically in terms of, but by attrition by retirement as opposed to attrition by departure. We've got a number of employees. You've seen it. You've probably most seen it most in all areas of the town. You've seen it a lot of. How many times we visited the police department in the last several months with, retirements and promotions and so forth. But we're seeing that across the board. Fire department, general government of the town, and so forth. And that's really the challenge that we see forward. And that's why when we got the board together, we wanted to formalize it because we also have an HR director who's served the town for 30 years. And so we want to make sure these things are institutionalized so that way there's good succession planning and those who come after us can know the blueprint and process that was in place, over the last years.
Right. And it's a different landscape now. The days of somebody coming to work for one municipality and staying 20, 30, 40 years, it doesn't exist. People change communities multiple times now. They're going for, again, the pay, the benefits. Shockingly, a lot of the employees aren't even as interested in the pension benefits, which blows my mind. But they're looking for those, flexibility and work-life balance issues. That's the new workforce out there. So keeping current with that and understanding that is going to be very important for all of the municipalities, including Chelmsford.
Okay.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Okay, and next up is the purchase of the Coolest Farm.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to give the board an update. I was working on this as recently as this afternoon. The Town Finance Director, John Souza, and I received the HUD statements this afternoon. We're tentatively scheduled to close tomorrow, although it could fall into next week, depending upon council was reviewing the title examination documents today. And John and I have been moving, real quick to make sure that we meet the obligations under the purchase and sale agreement. And John made a good catch on the taxes that were owed, because we had to calculate the taxes that were owed, to the day of the closing, just like when you buy a house, the day of your closing, and as well as John noting the back taxes and everything, everything that's done there. What I can tell you also related to this, because I want to get it on the record, this afternoon at 2:00. And I was presented with the environmental assessment that was discussed at town meeting. Donna Coolis came to my office. Carl Bischoff, who's the chair of the Conservation Commission, was present. He and I reviewed that report. And I don't have it for you because they did not want to release the report because of their concerns that there were people who were opposed to the sale of the property. But what I can tell you, and Carl be my witness, is that the report states unequivocally that that there are no environmental concerns that meet any thresholds of environmental monitoring or regulations. That was clearly spelled out. It was a 56-page or so document that tested multiple areas of the property having to do with items remote as the apple farm that was to the, I guess it would be to the north of the property as you were on Pine Hill Road, to where the former barn building was, to where the vehicles were, all the test borings, everything else that was all there. Again, she hand-delivered it. Carl and I she gave us all the time we wanted. She sat with us. We reviewed the document. But I want to assure the board and the community that there are no environmental concerns on that property, and that was encouraging. And she described it as, the family who farmed there, they were maybe they were a little ahead of their times, but she said even when they grew the apples there, they were very sparse and very hesitant to apply chemicals. Because if you're maybe aware, the residential standards are even greater than your industrial standards, which is why, so for example, so anyway, I wanted to let the board be aware of that in terms of that, because that concern was raised. We've also engaged with the help of David Kuntz. We've got a couple of proposals, and hopefully one will start soon, to do wetlands flagging on the property after closing, because we want to make clear to the community what areas are environmentally sensitive, and therefore, you've got your buffer zone just like any other user of the property. So we're hopeful that can get done before the weather hits us. If not, it'll be done in the spring. The task force, we received applications and commitments from the various boards, so I expect to be here next meeting in 2 weeks to seek the confirmation of the task force. I have received a couple of residential applications and obviously would welcome additional ones. And then the only other thing that I would like to do after closing would be to file for demolition of the structure, the demolition delay notice. Not that it obligates the town or obligates or means that we'll demo the structure, but as the board may be aware, and I know anybody who does business with the town is aware, that's a prerequisite to if you are going to do it. And as you know, there's a demolition period of review where the historical commission has a chance to review the property and everything. And again, as part of the planning process, I think we should just initiate that so that in the event that is one of the recommendations, at least we can move on it in a timely manner. So that's sort of where I'm at this point, and I just wanted to let the board know and the community know where we're at. And again, if the closing occurs tomorrow, obviously I'll notify you, and if it occurs next week, I'll notify you, whenever it takes place. But we're moving in partnership, to bring this in fulfillment of the town meeting vote. So that's where we are. And the reason I put this formally on the agenda as opposed to my report is it was a safeguard, because when I was talking to council last week, I said, is there anything that the board needs to sign or do or vote or anything? And at this point, there does not appear to be anything. But I wanted it as a placeholder. I didn't want to do like a revised agenda or anything. Just, I'd rather be safe than, and cautious in case there was something. But I don't have anything for you to formally act upon. But again, we're moving on that. So that's where it
Any
stands.
questions for Paul on that?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
And then, go ahead.
Good news.
Okay, yeah. And then under my report, which is next on your agenda, just a couple things. And one is, again, another high-profile issue in the community that's occurred since the last meeting, and that was the oil spill off of Route 3 in Billerica, but right at the Chelmsford border. I'm sure everybody has seen the video of it, perhaps, and or read the news accounts and so forth, where a oil tanker was flipped as a result of a three-car accident, of which the driver of the tanker, remarkably, was the most responsible of all the drivers. It was amazing, if you watch that video, how well he handled that vehicle and prevented what could have been a serious tragedy in terms of either injury to other people and/or. But the bottom line is, since that incident occurred, there's been now the cleanup and environmental remediation. And I received an update that came from the LSP, who the state assigned to this project, and it's even, I sent it to you after 5 o'clock, because it just came into the fire chief at 4:47. And I'll just summarize it real quick, because I know people are seeing containers and everything else out there, and obviously they're concerned. But as of right now, currently there are 97,000 gallons of waste storage in bermed, locked out frac tanks. So in other words, and then there's 300 to 325 cubic yards of soil in tarped, lined roll-off canisters. So obviously what's happening out there is they're removing topsoil where the spill occurred, and they're pumping and out, the wetland areas where the thousands of gallons of fuel stored. Obviously, the rain didn't help the other day, and it's probably not going to help this Wednesday. But they are basically, what they're doing is they're putting it into sealed containers that won't leak, and obviously they have to have that tested to see how they can properly dispose of the soils and so forth. Because one of the things that happened out there, if you saw some of the video, is because it was the danger of the fuel, is they sprayed foam. And obviously foam, we all know, we were talking earlier about PFAS and everything else. So everything is being addressed with, properly environmentally. Again, this is not the first time an oil tanker has flipped on a Massachusetts highway. So the DEP has state protocols and so forth, and they've notified the water districts and such. And again, so they also have, 50 cubic yards of bag PP, protective equipment for individuals and absorbents, all that stuff. So everything's being contained. And then again, moving forward, they're going to continue to monitor the basins for gasoline and do recovery, with soil excavation as needed, remediation and evaluation of soil and groundwater quality, and then obviously long-term remediation and mitigation measures will be addressed. So this, how the state does this, is obviously they hire a licensed site professional, reports to the DEP, is sort of the point person communicating with the water districts, because it not only affects Chelmsford water for the East Chelmsford Water District and the town of the Chelmsford Water District. The town of Berker is also monitoring this as well, because obviously, they want to be concerned about any impacts, for the town of Berker. So that's where we are at this. And I think with the holiday coming up, you're probably not going to see a lot going out there until next week, because, again, they're not going to be out there on Thanksgiving Day, but they are monitoring it. So I'll keep you updated as this moves along.
Can I ask about
Sure.
so the waste storage, they're storing some of it in Chelmsford, right?
Yeah,
over-
if you, on the on-ramp, if you come off of
What, will they
129.
eventually haul it out of there to
Yeah, they'll
somewhere
haul it
else?
away. Yeah, it's not going to be a permit. Those are temporary containers, and they'll bring it
Where
to
do they haul it to?
facilities.
Just curious.
Well, it will depend upon the nature of the soil testing. If it's, depending on what those test results come back, will depend where it can go. Would it be considered hazardous waste, or
If it comes back fine, were they going to dump it back?
No, they won't just, no, they're not going to dump it back there, but it really depends on how they could use it if depending on what's in there. So that's how it'll be treated, depending on how the results come back. Okay. And then another note to the community, and my final note this evening, and just to give another heads up, because I just got this one this afternoon as well. The DPW Highway Division is going to begin the demolition of the McCarthy tennis courts the week of December 11th. Not because there's any plan on what's going to happen there, but because the courts have become so in a state of disrepair that whatever's going to happen there is not going to be the existing courts out there. And basically where this is a time where the DPW can assist the community and the district with doing that work. So I wanted to give you and those watching and others, we'll probably put something out in the newsletter as well, let you know that demolition work will begin December 11th. It won't take very long, but I just know the phone calls and the inquiries and questions will start arising as well. What is the town doing over there? We're not doing anything because
Have you heard anything about that committee?
because here's where that's at. That's a committee that was formed by the school committee because it's school property, and in speaking to the superintendent, he's hoping that something can get resolved, and then that would actually, if you look at their capital request, that may be considered for 2024 Springtown meeting in April. So they are active on this, but again, that's school property. We can never lose a sight of that, and I think they're hoping. I think what they heard the community is the desire for tennis courts, probably pickleball, and so forth. And I think that's what you'll see coming. But again, before anything can start, they're going to basically take out the decayed previous tennis courts that aren't playable. So I just wanted the board and the community to be aware
Yeah,
of that.
because the pickleball people will be asking.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
sure.
Yeah, so they're aware of that. So that's my report for this evening. Madam
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. And you have a couple appointments?
Oh, yes, I do have two appointments, and one is to the Board of Assessors, and that is an appointment of Michael Donahue to the Board of Assessors. Michael's sort of transitioning, I guess as people may be aware, Michael has announced that he'll be retiring from the Chelmsford Fire Department at the end of the calendar year. And so he wants us to stay and be involved in the community, and he's submitted his name for the Board of Assessors. And so that would be for a term ending June 30th, 2026. And then the other appointment I have for your confirmation is Peter Casserly for a full-time position on the Board of Appeals for a term ending June 30th, 2026. He's been the longest tenured associate member, So basically that's why I've moved his name to bring him up to a full member, because that's been the practice. So if you appoint him, then I will then recruit and put on the vacancy list for an associate member
We
of the
have
Board
two
of Appeals going.
associates?
We have three.
Three.
Yeah. Basically, it's Peter, it's Glenn Diggs, and it's,
Leaves.
and Rod Cleaves.
Okay.
And Glenn is the senior, next one in line in terms of senior. So I would seek your confirmation of those two appointments this evening.
For the Board of Assessors,
Mhm.
does Mr. Donahue have to go through like state training and certification?
Yes.
But there's nothing that restricts us from appointing him before
Right.
that?
How the statute works under the state regulations is he has to complete that within 1 year of appointment.
Okay.
And he's aware of that, and it's online now, and he's
Yeah.
willing to do that training.
Any questions?
Any questions?
I will make a motion to confirm the town manager appointments of Michael Donahue to the Board of Assessors for a 3-year term ending June 30th, 2026, and Peter Casserly to the Board of Appeals for a 3-year term ending June 30th, 2026.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. George?
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 He's frozen.
Or is asleep?
There he is. George, how do you vote on these appointments?
You're muted, George.
He-
That's why you can't hear him.
Oh.
He's muted. There you go.
Yes.
Thank you. Aaron?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I'm an aye. Okay, 4-0. All right. Next up is meeting minutes.
You want to fill your glass of water?
Okay, so we have meeting minutes from October 23rd, 2023. Do we have any edits or corrections on those?
No.
If
I'll
not,
make a motion to approve the Select Board meeting minutes for October 23rd, 2023.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. George?
Yes.
Aaron?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Okay, and November 6th, we have those minutes also. Any edits, corrections on those? If not,
I'll make a motion to approve the November 6th, 2023 Select Board minutes.
I'll second the motion.
okay, we have a motion and a second. George?
Yes.
Aaron?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I'm aye. Okay, 4-0. All right, and we have some announcements for releasability of executive session minutes. The following minutes have been approved for release. January 9th, 2023, Segment 2. January 23rd, 2023, Segments 2 and 3B. April 27th, 2022, Segment 1. May 15th, 2023, Segments 1 and 2. October 11th, 2022, Segment 3. November 7th, 2022, Segments 2.2 and 2.3. November 21, 2022, Segments 2 and 4. December 5th, 2022, Segments 1 and 2. January 23rd, 2023, Segment 1C. February 27th, 2023, Segments 3 and 4. May 1st, Segment 2. May 1st, 2023, Segment 2. May 9th, 2022, Segment 4. May 23rd, 2022, Segment 1. And minutes not for release, October 6th, 2023, Segment 2. So, and October 23rd, 2023. Okay, we're now to Select Board Liaison Reports and Referrals. George, I see you're still there. Very good. Do you have any,
I haven't in yet, but, you know.
you have anything?
I would like to just wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, you know.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, thank you. Aaron? Same thing?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Virginia?
Just from the capital planning, then their next meetings are planned for November 30th and December 7th. From the Conservation Commission, in addition to the annual Day Before Thanksgiving walk, COS is also hosting the Amazing Decorated Winter Tree Scavenger Hunt again this year. So more than 20 trees are decorated on open space sites in town, and you can look at the COS Facebook page for more details. Both the Conservation Commission and the Vinyl Square Committee would like to encourage the public to attend the Freeman Lake Public Input Session, which will be on Tuesday, December 5th at 7 o'clock in room 205 at the town offices. And there is also a feedback survey online that you can find on the homepage on the news flashes that scroll across that page. And also from the Vinyl Square Strategic Action Plan Committee, their next meeting is tomorrow, Tuesday, November 21st at 7 p.m. It'll be held in room 205 and also via Zoom. And as always, they welcome public attendance and input. And happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, I just have a couple of things. Also, happy Thanksgiving. And just, I want to report last Monday, we had a chairs meeting in the next room here. It was very well attended. I was quite surprised at all the people that did come. I think we had at least 27 people in the room and who represented over 30 different committees in town. It was pretty amazing. I was very pleased with the people that came. A lot of interesting information was transferred between everybody. So something that I think we will continue that on a regular basis. We'll to be determined how frequently. So thanks to everybody who came. I appreciate that. And good luck to the football team who will be playing in Fenway Park on Wednesday afternoon. It should be a good game, and I hope they bring that, what is it called, the Brick Hill Trophy?
Brick Hill Cup, yeah.
Yeah, Brick Hill Cup. Hope they bring that home. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
It's 8:14 p.m. and I will motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
George?
Yes, aye.
Aye. Oh, sorry. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. It's unanimous, 4-0. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good night, George.